Welcome to this video. I'm Snuggle Factory, and these are some tips and tricks I've learned about embroidery machines over the last few years. It's not unusual that most people think that an embroidery machine can only do embroidery. However, I've found that there are some ways to get more out of your embroidery experience. If you're interested in learning more about plush artistry, please consider checking out my Patreon. I post all my patterning works in progress, and I hold a monthly giveaway for Patreons. I'll post a link in the description so you can check it out. I'm not sure about your machine, but I find it nearly impossible to get the hoop in the holder while it's in its home position. The best way I've found to get around this is to open a small embroidery file and move it all the way to the top of the embroidery area so that the holder is at its lowest position. From here I'm easily able to lever the hoop into its holder. Sometimes I find that the embroidery hoop, even when tightened really tight, doesn't grab the sides of the fabric well. One way I've found to get around this problem is to simulate multiple layers of fabric to help hold the fabric in place. You can use many different materials for this, however a grippy one is preferable. In this video I'm making one out of felt. However, in the past I've used cotton quilt batting and it's worked equally well. To make the collar I lined it up with the embroidery hoop and then I cut out the inside area. Here's an example of how to use your new hoop collar. If you've ever had the problem where your embroidery machine tries to eat your top stabilizer if you don't hold it down the entire time, I have a solution for you. When digitizing my embroidery files, I create a running stitch around the outside to hold down the top stabilizer. I personally like to make sure it's a different color to the next embroidery item. This way the machine will pause before it starts its next piece. I also changed the stitch length to be much longer, as the perimeter stitch will have to be unpicked later, and it can quickly become very tedious if it's a short stitch length. If you're embroidering something that's going to be cut out as a pattern, I definitely recommend stitching out the pattern as well. If it's a small piece and you can fit the whole pattern into your embroidery space, I recommend doing so. If it's a larger piece, you can sew out part of your pattern, or some sort of identifying element that makes it easier to line up with your pattern piece. I definitely recommend doing this if you're going to be cutting out multiple pieces. It can help to line up pieces together or with the pattern, plus it can also help you prevent cutting pieces on a slightly wrong angle. Floating fabric is a process where you don't actually hoop the fabric. You just hoop the stabilizer and you float the fabric on top. We might do this for many reasons. One is because the fabric might be precious and we don't want to crush it in the hoop. Another reason could be because the piece of fabric just isn't big enough to fit in the embroidery hoop. But one of the biggest reasons to float fabric is actually for efficiency. This way you're able to embroider more pieces at once, and you're also able to get more out of your stabilizer. In this example, I'm using cutaway stabilizer, as well as my hoop collar to prevent the stabilizer from slipping in the hoop. Probably one of the most useful tricks you can use your embroidery machine for is getting it to sew things for you. I use this technique for a lot of things, but most commonly I use it to sew wings together for a plush. In my embroidery software, I create a running stitch around the wing, in the pattern that I would usually use if I were going to sew it together on my sewing machine. When the embroidery machine is finished embroidering the detail, you grab a second piece of fabric and you lay it over the top of your embroidery. You then allow the embroidery machine to sew the two pieces together. Be sure to leave a gap in the stitching so that you're able to turn your piece in the right way. I don't worry about doing that with wings because I know that they're going to be against the body of the plush, so instead I create a small cut in the back. This one can take a bit more effort, but I find that it can be a very useful tool. In your embroidery software, you'll want to sew a line where your embroidery machine will stitch out the applique design. Make sure that this color is a different color to your satin stitching, so that the machine will pause in between stitching and you're able to cut away the excess fabric. After you've cut away the fabric and you begin again, the embroidery machine should then create a satin stitch hiding the edge of the fabric that you just cut out. Thanks for watching this video, and good luck!